Please switch on your mic.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am ready, Chair. Chair, the next witness is going to be Ronald Chingangwe. He is here.
Yes, okay. Will somebody direct him where to go?
Yes, please.
Why is there?
I did say Chingangwe is going first. I can't hear it. What you say? Yes, Chair.
Please, yes.
Chair, Mr. Chingangwe is deposed to an affidavit. It has been marked Exhibit E5 because it deals with the removal of Minister Collins Shubham Maseko.
The removal of Mr. Maseko.
Mr.
Not
Maseko,
Minister
yes.
Maseko.
Minister Maseko, sorry, Chair.
Not Minister Maseko, Mr. Maseko.
Mr. Maseko, yes.
Mr.
Sorry,
Maseko
I
was
just need
DG, Mr. Chabane was Minister.
Yes, I understand. Sorry, Chair, it's just, I will settle down now. With your approval, Chair, if his statement could be placed into evidence as Exhibit E5.
The affidavit by Mr. Ronald Chingangwe will be admitted and will be marked as Exhibit E5. And I think we must go ahead and have the oath or affirmation administered.
Yes.
Let's get going.
Please state your full names for the record.
Ronald Chingangwe.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you'll give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you, Mr. Chingangwe, and thank you for availing yourself to assist the Commission. I was told of a concern that you had, but based on what is in your statement, there would not be any grounds for the Commission to do anything along the lines that you were requesting. Do you understand?
I do.
Yes, but thank you for availing yourself to assist the Commission with what you know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chingangwe, could you please tell the Chair what has been your history of employment with the Government of South Africa?
Okay, I started working in the Limpopo Province Department of Finance 1994. 1997, I moved to the Department of Public Works. Sorry?
I'm sorry, Ms. Venzel, do you want him to identify his affidavit first, confirm his signature,
Yes.
and confirm that what's in the affidavit is correct before
Yes.
asking him questions?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. The affidavit in front of you, is that your affidavit and your signature?
Yes, it is.
And do you confirm the contents?
Yes, I do.
You confirm them as correct. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay. And is that your signature on page 3,
Yes, it is.
next to your name?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. You may go ahead.
Mr. Shingange, could you tell the chair under what circumstances you came to provide an affidavit to the commission?
Well,
Under what
I'm sorry,
circumstances?
I'm sorry. Have you decided to abandon the first question you asked? Okay, let's start. Mr. Shingange, you have in paragraph 4 of your statement set out the history of your employment within government.
Yes.
Is it correct that among the positions that you have held in government is the position you held between 2009 and 2013, that position of being advisor to Minister Chabane
Yes.
in the office of the presidency?
Yes, it's correct.
Yes, okay, thank you.
And could you please tell the chair what was your relationship with Minister Shabane?
As I said in the affidavit, I was his advisor between the period of 2009 to 2013. And before that, we had worked together in the Department of Economic Development and also Public Works in the Limpopo province.
Yes.
And not necessarily with him. At some stage, you were acting head of department at Public Works, is that right?
Yeah, for a period of about 3 years, yes.
About 3 years, and you were at some stage chief executive officer of the Corridor Mining Resources
Yes.
Company. That's a private company.
It's a subsidiary of Limpopo Economic Development Agency.
It's a parastatal.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
And are you currently in the employ of government?
No, I'm not, unfortunately.
You'd like to go back?
No, I wouldn't.
Oh, I thought you said unfortunately.
Yeah, well,
Oh, okay, all right. Yes, continue.
In your affidavit, you deal with the removal of Mr. Tembo Maseko from the GCIS and the replacement of him with Mr. Manye. When did you first hear about this removal?
it was a week after the removal of Temba. We were walking into a meeting with Minister Chavan, and then I asked him, okay, what happened? Why did you remove Temba? He says, okay, I was instructed. So it was roughly a week after I was removed.
And what did you understand by instructed? Instructed by whom?
I'm sorry, I may have missed something. You and Minister Chabane were going into a meeting,
Yes,
you say about a week after
After
Mr.
I was
Masego's removal from GCIS.
yes,
And you asked him the question, why was Temba removed?
Yes.
Is that how you put it? And what was his answer, Mr. Chabane?
that I was instructed. Then I said, I shrugged. I said, oh, okay. That was it. I never followed up as to why
Yes,
and
Okay.
by who.
yes,
Because my common assumption was that obviously it can only be one person who can instruct him.
Yes.
With the appointing authority, with the president.
yes.
So I never followed up, but he never
Yes.
told me I was instructed by someone, so he never told me
Yes,
that.
but that was your own understanding,
Yeah,
that there could only have been one person.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And why didn't you ask any questions about this?
Look, at the time, if you follow the trend, there was a lot of movements of directors generals from one department to another. So I didn't find it extremely curious to say why is it being removed. So I just assumed, okay, it's one of those movements that are being done from one place to another, because you must remember that it was the second or third year of the new administration, so obviously a lot of the changes were still happening. So that's why I never bothered to ask why.
And if Mr. Maseko had been dismissed, would you have asked questions?
Yeah, definitely. That will have attracted my curiosity as to why is it being dismissed. But because it was being moved from one department to another, I never thought it's an interesting matter.
And you know that the former president has testified before the commission that he did not instruct Minister Shabani to move Mr. Maseko. How did you know about this, and how did you come to know about it?
About the testimony of the former president?
Yes.
Well, after his testimony, I didn't watch the testimony. A lot of people phoned me to say, is this possible what the former president said? I said, look, I didn't watch the testimony, but it's improbable because there's only one person who's got the powers to remove DGs. So that's how I end up being here today, because I spoke too much.
Okay, just make sure we understand. You didn't watch the evidence that was given by.
I only watched it repeat in the evening.
Later.
I didn't watch it.
When it was happening.
Yeah, I watched it after people had phoned me to tell me
Yes.
this and that happened.
Yes. You say a lot of people called you, and what were they asking, or what were they saying exactly?
Is it possible that Chabane would have removed a DG
Yes.
without the knowledge of the president?
Yes. Okay.
Is it in his character to defy, so to speak?
And why did they phone you to find that out?
I suppose because I was his advisor, they would have expected me to know
Yes.
what such a
What
development.
the position was.
And then also a lot of people assumed that we had a certain relationship which was close.
Yes.
So that's why they phoned me.
Yes. How was your relationship with Minister Chaban? Was it a very good relationship?
Yeah, I'll say so. You know, I've got a Greek friend who says, don't tell me that I'm close to the minister. Ask the minister if he's close to me. Unfortunately, it's not here to answer. But yes, Chairperson, I think we had a good relationship.
Yes. Do you know how his relationship, that is Minister Chaban, how his relationship was with Mr. Maseko during the time that they were working together at GCIS?
It was good. I never saw any tension between the two of them during the period that they were working together.
Right up to the time that Mr. Maseko was removed?
Yes, I never saw any tension between the two of them.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
And were you told by these people who phoned you that the former president had stated that Minister Shabani had merely used his name?
Yes, that's what they told me. And that's what that was the question. They were asking me that, is it possible that he could have done that? Is it in the character of Minister Chaban to do something like that? So I said, no, it's not possible. And then I mentioned to one or two people that, look, this is what I know about the issue. He told me something like this, Minister Chaban, before he passed away. And unfortunately, that's what led me to be here today.
Okay. Okay. You
Chair,
have no further
unless-
questions?
Yes, I have no further questions
Yes.
unless you, Chair, would
No,
like to ask some
thank you,
questions.
Mr. Shingange. Thank you for coming to share with the Commission what you heard and what you knew as far as you were told by Minister Chaban. Thank you very much.
Thanks very
You are
much.
excused. Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
thank you.
Thank you. Chair, the next witness is Brent Simons, who previously testified, but Chair, you will recall that the Rule 33 notice sent to the former president in respect of his testimony was provided less than 14 days before he testified, and because of that, it was decided that he should come and testify with regard to the former president at a later stage. He is now available to testify, and I wish to call him in.
So the Rule 33.3 notices were sent to the former president, and as of today, there's been no reaction.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Then you can administer the oath of affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Brent Adrian Simons.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath? No. Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence you'll give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair.
You confirm that you will only cover what was not covered previously, because it did give evidence and covered quite some ground.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Simons, you previously testified at the Commission, and you stated that you previously worked for Minister Shabani Minister Colin Shabani in the Office of the Presidency, and you later worked for him in the DPSA, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, during 2017, you submitted an affidavit.
Maybe we can just to refresh our memories. Mr. Simons, you worked in the presidency between which year and which year? From which year to which year?
I started joined the minister in the presidency in January 2014.
Yes.
Yeah, and then remained with him until he passed on in the accident in the following year.
Yes, okay, thank you. And you were was it chief of staff or advisor?
No, I was spokesperson for the minister in the presidency, and then also spokesperson for the minister when he had his role as Minister for Public Service and Administration.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. You say in paragraph 4 of your statement that in 2017, you submitted an affidavit to the Secretary of Parliament and the Speaker of the National Assembly to refute the former President, Mr. Jacob Zuma's denial that he'd used his position to secure government contracts for his family members. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Chair, this document is not annexed to Mr. Simons' affidavit, but it has been obtained by the Commission. If I might refer you to page 146 of the bundle in front of you.
The bundle is Exhibit JJ1.
Yes, the bundle's Exhibit JJ1.
What is the page?
Page 146.
Yes.
Is that an unsigned copy of the statement you submitted to the Speaker of Parliament?
That is correct, Chair.
And if you have regard to BAS page 147, paragraph 11, it is said, while answering parliamentary questions on Thursday, the 22nd of June 2017, our President once again blatantly lied to the people of South Africa when he declared that he had never asked anyone to take care of or help a family member secure a contract. Is that correct?
Yeah, as is.
Just to confirm, do you confirm the contents of that statement, unsigned statement, to be true and correct?
I do, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Chair, there's a number of statements then, or averments made in the statement which are going to be dealt with in evidence and have expressly been dealt with in Mr. Simon's affidavit before the Commission. So I won't traverse them here in any real detail.
Yeah.
But I would like to point out to you, Chair, is that there is a transcript, an unrevised Hansard, from Hansard for this date, the Thursday, the 22nd of June, 2017, and you will find that now at page 151.
Yes.
And is this the transcript that you were referring to?
In fact, at that stage, I was obviously, as an ordinary South African and as a public servant, I was reading the newspapers, watching television, etc., and the President was responding to a question where I think it was one of the DA members who had asked whether he had helped Dudazane or anyone else with business interest, if I had brought people to any ministers, and I thought that was incorrect because, and that is why I actually sat down and drew up this affidavit. But I should bring to your attention, Chairperson, that I do say right at the beginning that I wrote it in my capacity as a senior public servant, as well as an ANC member. And from about 2016, 2015, end of 2015 onwards, I consistently submitted a very similar report to the Office of the Secretary General of the ANC, saying that the President has brought the organization into disrepute, pointing out those and providing very similar responses to what I did in my affidavit. I received no responses from my SG.
And so you say you sent to the Secretary General of the ANC of the time a number of such
submissions,
letters or emails or whatever.
Yes.
Did you send them in writing?
I sent them in writing.
What's your recollection of about how many you might have sent?
Probably about 8 or 9.
About 8 or 9?
Yeah.
Instances where you felt, and did they all relate to the President or did they also relate to other members of the leadership of the ANC?
They all particularly dealt with the fact that at that stage I believed that the President was doing more harm to both the organization and the country at that stage.
Yes.
And obviously, as you would see in the affidavit, what led to some disciplinary steps against me as well within the public sector was because of statements I made in my capacity as an ANC member to other organizational members. So yes, we were discussing it, and if you recall my earlier testament, I actually told you that when Minister Chabane was of such a nature that he would speak politics to you whenever he had the opportunity, and he was always interested in knowing, of trying to find out what the views of the citizens were regarding the President and regarding the ANC as a government. So we had that type of interaction very constantly.
And did you keep copies of the emails or letters that you sent to the Secretary General of the ANC relating to these various concerns that you had?
I am sure if I sent it via Gmail, I
Yes.
should be able to have some
Yes.
records in my
Okay.
my Gmail, because some of my evidence was not based on my government emails. It was some of the evidence of meetings that I withdrew from my Gmail account.
Yeah, if you can find them, that would be very helpful to send to the Commission
I'll do.
copies as well. And then to Parliament, did you send only one, or did you also send a number of them to Parliament?
I sent it to the office of the Speaker of Parliament. I sent it to the Deputy Speaker of Parliament. I also sent to the Chief Whip of the ANC at Parliament.
Are you saying you sent the same one to all those people, or do you send different ones to different people?
No, the signed affidavit, I sent it to all of them. Yeah.
So with regard to Parliament, the affidavit is the only one that you sent to somebody in Parliament expressing your concern?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe just to make sure one understands this, you say somewhere around 2016 or thereabout, you became aware from what you read in the media that in Parliament, the former president had been asked a question to which he responded by saying he had never tried to help any member of the family get government business. Is that right? Is that what you became aware of that prompted you to prepare the affidavit?
Yes, it was also, that's why I'm saying that if I can get copies, and I'll go and look at my Gmail account for some of the original documents I submitted to the Office of the Secretary General.
Yes.
Then you would see that there is a consistency in terms of
Yes.
my concerns raised as both a member and as a public servant.
Yes, but what prompted the affidavit particularly is that you had or understood that he had given information in Parliament which you considered not to be true.
Yes,
And you prepared the affidavit and sent it to Parliament to bring it to their attention that, as far as you are concerned, he had told Parliament something that was not true.
yes, correct.
Okay, all right.
Did you watch the question time recordings on television, or did you read it in the media?
In fact, at that stage, whenever the President was answering questions at Parliament, it was in our nature to as communicators, and I think that to actually make sure that we have time to watch. If we didn't watch it, then we would obviously try and follow up later. But I obviously followed up via television when the President was addressing Parliament, as well as later when I read through all the online and actual physical publications.
And have you had a chance to read this extract from Hansard for Thursday, the 22nd of June 2017, that I referred you to earlier, that starts at
What page again was it?
It starts at page 151.
Yeah.
Are you able to tell the chair what?
Was the answer yes, that you have had a chance to read it?
I read through it, yes.
Yes, okay.
Are you able to tell the chair what statement it is that you thought was untrue,
Well-
that prompted your affidavit?
Yes, on page one.
Or maybe let us put it this way. Is the statement that prompted you to prepare the affidavit contained in this extract from the Hansard?
The basis of that statement, yes.
Okay, all right.
Because
It is here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. Then you can go ahead to identify it.
Okay. on page 156, the response is where the President then says, secondly, I have never heard that Duduzane's business has benefited from the government. Where I have influenced by saying, give him something, I have never done that. Now that is particularly to Duduzane. Now I'm not familiar of any of the relations between the President, his son, and whatever business ventures he might have gone on. But what I then did was, on the basis of that and previous statements made by the President, I then said that, look, the President has in fact brought family members to ministers and that I was aware of, and in particular the minister that I worked with. And on that basis, I then drafted the statement and submitted it to the affidavit to Parliament.
And which minister are you referring to?
I'm referring to Minister Collins Chabane, the late minister.
Just to go back on your ANC membership, at that time were you already a member of the ANC at the time of referring this affidavit to Parliament?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And why did you believe it not to be true?
Well, one particular incident which I referred to in the
I'm sorry again, Ms. Wenzel. I may have referred to 2016. It appears from this extract from the Hansard that the day to which the transcript relates is Thursday, 22 June 2017.
17.
So does that sound more or less right in terms of the year?
Yes. In fact, I think in the affidavit I submitted to Parliament, I also make reference to that date.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Then I think the question that Ms. Wenzel had asked you was, why did you think that the former president had said something that was not true? Why did you think it was not true?
There was a particular incident in 2014 where the National Youth Development Agency was launching the Solomon Maslangu Scholarship Fund. The President was scheduled to address that particular meeting, and the Minister was invited to open that meeting. And on that day, in fact, we had secured the Minister to address students at a college in Randfontein. That was confirmed. Minister had committed that he was going to do it, but we then also received the request for the Minister to introduce, open the particular NYDA function on that Friday morning. Now, on that particular day, obviously, the Minister, we were standing around in the foyer of the Sandton International Convention Center. After the President had spoken, I was standing literally, I was next to the Minister, we were having a talk. Now, obviously, protocol dictates that if the President comes to a Minister that you don't really stand around, you give them the space. So I would obviously have walked away then, but not too far. I mean, I was still clearly, I could see the Minister, I could see the President, and with the President were several young men. Now, as the President left, the Minister came to me and he then introduced me to these young men and told me that he wanted me to deal with them in terms of meetings, etc. And on that basis, I was then introduced to some of these men, and some of them had the surname of Zuma. And one in particular referred to Kulabuse Zuma as his father figure. And on that basis, we left with the Minister, and we went to I think it was Westcall Further Education and Training College, where GCI's, the Government Communications and Information System, had actually organized a function post State of the Nation address for the Minister. So the college students were asking questions very directly related to their future in this country, how would they be able to contribute, asking questions about the State of the Nation address and so on. So after that meeting, I actually again had to make contact with these young men, and we had several meetings since then. Even when the minister left, was transferred after the election from the presidency to DPSA, they still came to us, and I was the main go-between for them and the minister. Now, in my affidavit to Parliament, I actually very clearly articulate what the minister told me, and the minister was keep them away from the ministry and keep them away from me. So you deal with them, I don't want to deal with them. And he would regularly ask me, sometimes I would go there and say, Chief, I'm being threatened here. And he would just say, look, you are protected, don't worry. As long as I know what you are up to, then that's okay.
Mr. Simons, if we can just unpack what you've said a little bit more slowly and perhaps in a little bit more detail. You say in your statement that this introduction by the former president of these young men to Minister Shibani took place on the 14th of March 2014. How do you know it was that date?
At first, I was also wondering, because getting the dates right is important. And when we were based in the presidency, we actually used Gmail accounts for correspondence. And some of those Gmail evidence which I have provided in terms of meetings, requests for meetings, comes from my Gmail account. So in those Gmails, it is very clear that it was at this particular event where the minister had met with the individuals, where the president or former president in fact introduced them to the minister.
And if you'll have a look at Annexure BAS1 on page 15,
yeah.
Is that the Gmail that is referred to?
Yeah. My Gmail, these would be some of the correspondence that would come from the POEs for President's office. So that would come from the President's office, and it would go to, for example, Brent 2708 would be my Gmail account.
And this is dated the 13th of March 2014. You say that the meeting would have taken place on the 14th of March. Could you explain that?
Yes, in fact, the then DG, Dr. Phillips, wanted a meeting with the minister. He then sent that request to one of the senior officials in the ministry, who then responded by saying that, according to his knowledge, the minister was confirmed to speak at the Westcall function organized by GCIS as part of their post-SONA activities. I do have correspondence, in fact, from the office as well, in which the NYDA formally sent the request to the office of the minister. It went to the parliamentary liaison officer, who then sent it to me and to various other officials, saying that they've seen the minister's program for the Friday, that it was going to be a tight to manage that particular event, because he now had to attend the NYDA function as well. So I clearly remember that particular run of events for that day.
Yes, and perhaps for completeness, if I can just read what is stated in the email you're referring to. It says, Dear Dr. Phillips, Minister is scheduled to address the GCIS Gauteng Post SONA Youth Dialogue at Westcall Campus in Randfontein tomorrow. According to our spokesperson, Minister will invite the audience to engage with him thereafter. Minister will join this event later than scheduled due to his attendance at the launch of the Solomon Mshlangu Scholarship Fund in Sandton by the President.
Yes.
Could you kindly arrange?
Yes.
Now, you said earlier that after you had seen the minister with these young men, you were introduced to them.
Yes.
Who were these young men?
There was a Mr. Mqondisi Zuma, Busa Zuma, and then Mr. Zwane. His first name is in the James Zwane. And I was basically then introduced to them and told that I needed to meet with them.
And the Commission has ascertained that the true surname for Mr. Mqondisi Zuma, his surname is in fact...
Mqondisi will be Mqondisi.
Yes.
You know, for the transcribers, just remember to...
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
His surname is actually Matembu. Do you know that?
Nope. At all stages of our interaction, correspondence, he refers to himself as a Mr. Mqondisi Zuma.
And what relationship did you believe that they had with the President, both Mr. Matembu and Mr. Zuma?
Well, they seem to have a close relationship with the President then, and I actually very openly made reference to that relationship. And then also, as I indicated, referred to Mr. Kulubuse Zuma as a father figure. And in the affidavit at a later stage, you'll see where I actually say that they, when they believed that I was busy with delaying tactics, they said that they would report me to the President as well as to Mr. Kulubuse Zuma.
And
You said that the person referred to in paragraph 8 in your affidavit as Mr. Mqondisi Zuma. You said there is correspondence where he represented himself as a Zuma.
In fact, all the email correspondence I have still in my possession refers
Yes.
directly to him using the surname Zuma. Yeah.
Okay. And depending on when, according to the information that Ms. Vincent, you say the Commission got when he started using the surname, it may well be that he subsequently changed the surname. So that would have to be investigated.
Chair, as I understand it, Matembu is the surname of his mother. So his birth certificate, I understand, is in the name of Matembu, but he dealt, as I understand, with the witness as if his surname were Zuma. I mean, yes, as if his surname was Zuma.
Well, did you get information from him or did you get this information from elsewhere? What surname he uses? Did he say he uses Mtembu and not Zuma? Or is this information you did not obtain from him?
I'm advised, Chair, that he uses both, that his father is Zuma, his mother is Mtembu, and if I can just lead some further evidence that might also lead some clarity onto this.
Well, before you lead the evidence, I just
Yes.
want to understand, because I don't want us to waste time about something that might not be important.
Yes.
So, whatever you know, you didn't get from him, is that
No.
correct?
We didn't get it from him.
Yeah.
Chair,
Yes.
if I'm allowed to.
Yes,
He
yes.
also befriended me on Facebook after the initial meetings. And even there, the surname is referred to as Zuma. And this morning, on my way here, I actually got a reminder from Facebook that it is his birthday today, and it clearly pointed again to Kondise Zuma.
So the reference to Mthembu is something you are hearing for the first time?
I heard it for the first time from the
From the
commission.
council, yeah,
Yeah.
from the investigators.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Thank you. Now, you say that after the former president had spoken to Minister Shabani, Minister Shabani came to you, introduced these people to you, and then you used the word that he told you to deal with them, but to keep them away from him. What did you understand by deal with them? Are those the words he used?
Yeah, according to the late minister, the president specifically requested that we assist these young people, and for us then they came with a list of potential business concepts and business ideas they wanted for government, and our assumption then automatically was that the instruction was to assist them with these business concepts. Minister Chabane then obviously, as I indicated in the original affidavit to Parliament, that he was not too happy with the situation then, and then asked me to deal with them exclusively.
Yes,
And-
Ms. Wenzel, I don't know whether I missed this. I was looking at paragraph 9 of Mr. Simon's affidavit because I had not heard, as he was giving evidence, him articulate in a way that I understood exactly what it is that he says the former president may have said to Minister Chabane about the young men.
Yeah.
Do you want to just deal with what did he say? Is there something that he said on that day, that is the former president, to Minister Chabane, which is connected with your thinking that what he said in Parliament was not true?
In fact, when the minister introduced them to me, he said, look, the request is for us to please assist these young people. They have some business ideas, and to technically introduce them to whoever they want to be introduced with. And that is why in some of the correspondence that they have sent to me, they actually asked, can you assist us with getting access to this office, or can you assist us to get access to that office? Mm-hmm. So I then obviously they knew that the instruction was, you meet with the people that have been referred to me as the minister, you deal with them and you assist them. But the minister was also very coy when he said, look, I don't want you to bring them to me. Keep them away from our office. And I think that's part of the reason why all the meetings that I had with them either took place somewhere in Johannesburg or in the Sandton area, but nowhere did we take them to the minister's office.
So is the position that you yourself did not hear what the former president said to Minister Chabane about these young men, but what you heard is what the minister subsequently said to you he had been told?
Yeah, to please assist him, yes.
Yes, okay. Yes, continue.
And
in terms of what Minister Chabane said to you, it is that he said, Mr. Zuma said, he or you people must try and assist these young people.
Yeah. In fact, the level of respect was always there, and he would refer to the president.
Yes, yes.
So the president has asked us to assist.
Yes.
So for me, the term that stood out there was to please assist them.
Yes.
And then obviously, in subsequent meetings with them, it became very clear what they wanted assistance with.
Yes.
Because they had some ideas in terms of businesses, and all those businesses had were directly linked with government, either tenders or potential contracts.
Yes. If you are able to remember quite well, if you have a good recollection of exactly what Minister Chabane conveyed to you I'd very much like you to articulate that clearly, because it's important for understanding whether there was something improper or not proper that may have been intended or meant. And in this regard, you may or may not be aware that this commission had evidence from Mr. Themba Masego, who said that on the day on which he was going to meet Mr. Ajay Gupta at the Gupta residence, he got a call from the former president, and the conversation that he had with the former president was that former president asked him to assist the Guptas. So here we are meeting what you say also was a request, as far as you were told by Minister Chabane, from the former president to assist these young people. So it's important that I understand as much as you are able to remember in terms of what Minister Chabane said he had been asked to do. Do you want to just articulate that once again?
Yes, in my submission to Parliament, I actually say that my instruction was to assist them with all their business concepts that they had, and therefore to link them up with the correct business people, not business people, it even included DGs and acting and deputy director generals. And at one stage, I personally actually called a meeting with another government official in which I was told to hand over a particular envelope. I knew the contents of the envelope, and I had to brief this official on what was to be done. So the understanding was try and get them to the correct people. But I think I also make it clear that the minister was saying keep them at bay as long as and as far as possible.
Yes. Are you able to tell me why you thought it was necessary for the former president to ask Minister Chabane to assist these young people, or for Mr. Chabane to ask you to assist them, as opposed to allowing them, if they needed any assistance from government, to approach government without the intervention of the president, like everybody? Did you have an understanding why that was necessary?
At that particular time, I don't think we had a clear reason as to why we had to assist them, other than having to assist them. But I think as our meetings progressed,
yes.
I actually came because I did some research for the minister as well, and then found out that some of these young people who were brought to the minister were the same people who already had some legal conflict with the National Youth Development Agency at that particular time. I think there was a dispute over a 36 million rand contract, and they were taking the NYDA to court. That was prior to the meeting. So I think that the position would have been that because there's already some trouble, you try and assist them as far as possible.
Okay. So because I guess the National Youth Development Agency would have been the place where one would have thought any young person seeking assistance would go. So, but if they already had disputes and arguments with them, they may then have sought assistance outside of the National Youth Development Agency. Okay.
And Chair, some of these issues that they wanted, for example, was for the ministry, who was then obviously the reporting entity for the NYDA as well, to actually assist in securing some funding from the NYDA as well for some of the projects.
Yes. Did Minister Chabane at that stage, did his portfolio have the NYDA under him? Did it include the NYDA in any way?
If I recall correctly, the NYDA reported to the minister in the presidency.
So he would have been responsible for it. Okay. So I guess that maybe it would make sense that if they had issues with the NYDA and the NYDA might not be able to help them because of those issues, they approach the minister who is responsible for the NYDA and for assistance.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, depending on what the assistance is. But for any proper and legitimate assistance, they would be entitled to go to the minister.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Simons, in paragraph 16 of your affidavit, you list the deals that these young men were interested in. Could you just tell the Chair briefly what were these businesses that they wished to pursue?
The Government Communication and Information System at that stage wanted to appoint companies that would centralize government advertising. They felt that they would be able to benefit from that by assisting and providing their services to GCS at that particular time. So one of the issues they wanted to reintroduce, and I'm saying reintroduce because my understanding was that we already had public information terminals, most of which were inactive and failing at that particular stage. So they were looking at the introduction of public information terminals. That would be at universities, at colleges, at Tucson service centers. At that stage, I think it was still called multi-purpose community centers. They wanted to, when we were in the presidency still, they were also looking at the NYDA, assisting them with funding for some of their particular projects, but we steered away from that because of the legal conflict that they were technically involved with already with the NYDA. And then when we left the presidency and we went to public service and administration, the request came through for them to be considered as the single service provider for cell phone contracts within government. Now, obviously, government spends tens of millions of rands on cell phone contracts monthly and annually. That would have been a huge contract, and they wanted us to look at the possibility of them becoming the key service provider to government. So they would go to established cell phone companies and then be the kind of intermediary between these companies and all public servants through DPS-A. And then also the government employees medical scheme was at that stage advertising. An advert went out for companies to tender for I don't know how many years it was, but I assume it would have been a 2, 3, 4 year contract to provide communication services, marketing services, branding services, etc. for GEMS. And that in itself was also a very expensive contract, which would have run well into a few 100 million at that stage.
And did you get an impression of who was funding these young men and their proposed businesses? Who was behind them, if there was anyone?
I don't know if they were particularly being funded by any individual, but for Kondise and his brother, for example, they very openly said that Mr. Kulubuse Zuma was funding their stay in Sandton, that they were getting an allowance from him, and that they technically, to a large extent, then was also representing him, and that is how they consistently portrayed themselves. And do you know through which entity they wish to secure these contracts with government? They came to us with a company called Wintelligent. Now, Wintelligent, when I was asked to do some basic check on them, is the company that was also in conflict with the National Youth Development Agency at that particular stage. So I then obviously, as I indicated, informed the Minister, gave him my brief little report on meetings that I've held with him, and then also some of these online articles which I then basically had printed out and provided to the Minister.
Mr. Simons, I want to show you a letter on page 20. And it's dated the 24th of March 2014, and it's signed by Mr. Shabani, and in that letter it's addressed to Mr. Zwane, who you say was one of these young men, and you say our recent engagement and not you say, it is said, our recent engagement and discussion at the launch of the Solomon Mshlangu Scholarship Fund refers. Thank you for your presentation on House It, your interactive web-based customer target billboard for digital advertising. It is indeed encouraging to find our young people making inroads in the area of digital advertising. In this regard, we support the efforts of the Win Intelligent Technology through their House It project, which will not only benefit our youth, but the community at large. Yours sincerely. Now, you've said that Minister Shabani said to keep these people away from me. Under what circumstances did he come to sign this letter? And could you explain what the House It project was?
The House It project was not presented to the Minister. It was presented to me, and to a large extent I actually crafted the letter as well, because if you have an understanding of how the ministries operate, if there's a proposal, if there's a project, you try and give the Minister as much information as possible. The House It project was not about bad concept at all. It was about trying to empower and getting youth in particular into the advertising industry. But since our very first meeting, which happened way before this letter, I constantly told the Minister, they want a letter from you indicating that there's some support from the office of the Minister and the President. He then told me to draft the letter. He read through it, and then he said, okay, fine, because it doesn't commit us to anything in particular within government. So it is a letter that just broadly says that, look, Brent spoke to the Minister, and the Minister has noted this project, and that basically through me, they will try and get as much support as possible from the Minister in the Presidency.
It looks like they wanted a letter from the Presidency that they could use to get whatever assistance from other people or business from people. Would that have been your thinking as well, or as to what the purpose of the letter was?
It would have been to try and assist them to open some doors within government, yes.
Yes.
And we very, I'm sure that there would be one or two people who would be able to verify that even though we've given them this letter, beyond that, we didn't really assist with any physical opening of doors to contracts within government.
But I guess that the least they must have wanted it for is to show it around.
Yes.
To say, even government supports us.
Yeah.
And their understanding would have been that that should carry some weight somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. I'd now like to refer you to a letter on page 22 of the bundle. It's an email from Mr. Matembo or Mr. Zuma, dated the 2nd of April 2014, addressed to you, copied to James Zwane and Archie Zondo, and it says, Dear Brent, I trust that this email will find you well. Pursuant to our last engagement, we would kindly request to meet with yourselves on the 4th of April 2014 at Michelangelo Towers, Park Firm, restaurant at 10 a.m. to discuss the Hazard and connect to government project and other digital solutions, thanking you in anticipation. Did you in fact meet with them after this request?
I met with them. I informed the minister that there was this request, and I also had to inform the chief of staff at that stage, so that there is, at least for our record purposes, they are aware that I'm officially traveling to meet with these individuals.
And then, after this meeting, did you receive a business proposal with regard to this Hazard project?
The business proposal was received and then basically just filed. No, not formally filed in the ministry, but filed within our own little setups on our laptops.
So, if I can refer you to page 24. It's an email from James Swanee, dated the 7th of April 2014, addressed to you. Dear Brent, please find attached the biz plan and see below notes from our meeting to do for Wintelligent, send biz plan, send rates, identify sites and get letters. To do for Brent, meet Donald with GCIS and get letter of support for Hazard. Talk to Donald about meeting Wintelligent. Rates 2,000 per screen per month. There will be 200 screens to begin with. Regards, James. And then on page 25, is that the business proposal that was sent to you?
Yes.
Now, in paragraph 23,
Of his affidavit.
of your affidavit, you refer to Annexure BAS 5, which can be found on page 44. And if I can take you to that. And this is an email dated the 8th of April 2014, and it's from the young Mr. Zuma to you, also copying James Swanee and Busa Zuma, and it says, Dear Brent, there's something we forgot to mention on Friday during our meeting. We had a chat with the Minister regarding our application for an ICASA license for the advertising on voice call concept AdCall. The Minister was willing to assist us secure a meeting with decision makers at ICASA who could help us fast-track the application. We also wanted to negotiate more favourable rates as we will be giving calls for free to the public. Can you assist us in securing a meeting with them? Looking forward to your reply. Regards, Ontlodisi. Can you explain that to the Chair, please? What was this about?
At this stage, we were also moving. I think it would have been election hearing period as well for the then general election. So what they wanted here was they wanted us to directly put them in contact with ICASA, but they wanted us to be present as well, because then you would have had someone from the presidency also participating in the meeting, which would have given it a certain elevated status according to them. So for this, they were proposing that they basically run adverts for government as well through a particular company of theirs, in which they would get all government departments to basically place adverts through them. And then if your phone rings, for example, and you don't answer, and after a couple of seconds it goes into voicemail, or if you answer it, you get a voice on the other side or a recording on the other side basically telling you that this is Home Affairs, you need to register SASA, etc. So that was part of their their proposal. But from their understanding, they actually needed a particular license to operate that. And they then wanted us to put them in contact with ICASA. That meeting also never materialized because there was no attempt from our side to put them in contact with ICASA.
Well, looks like you were reluctant to do this part of what they wanted you to do. Am I right?
Yes, they were already in contact with ICASA.
Yes. So tell me about the basis for your reluctance. Is it just that they were already in contact with ICASA, or is it something more than that?
No, it was in fact what if you read the email, they don't say it exactly in the email there, but what they're saying is that, look, we want you to fast track the application. We also want special rates from ICASA. So they wanted us as the presidency or the minister in the presidency to come in and then basically try and pull some strings and tell ICASA, look, this is a special application here. Fast track it. We don't want you to delay it. They then also wanted us to as the office of the minister in the presidency to basically instruct ICASA as well. Look, either you reduce the rates or you don't give them any rates. You don't charge them anything. And at that stage, we felt that is not something that we were prepared to do, and therefore. Even the minister had no objection when we declined to assist on this particular event. And our declining never went in a formal letter or email declining. It was just us basically ignoring correspondence regarding this.
Yes. But they didn't specifically say they wanted you to do anything more than being present at such a meeting with ICASA. Or did they?
In fact, the email says exactly what they said in the meeting as well.
Yes.
They wanted us to assist with making sure that the application goes through faster, that there's no unnecessary delays, which they've in fact regarded formal processes as a waste of time and delays. So they thought that with us present, they would be able to expedite the entire proposal that they were presenting. And then also in that process, then we also want to negotiate, what did I say there, more favorable terms in terms of us being youth. We want a reduced rate from ICASA, that they not charge us what they would charge any other South African company.
Excuse me. So would it be correct to say that they wanted you to use the presidency or the ministry in the presidency to advance their cause or case at ICASA?
That would be correct.
Yes. And you thought that was going beyond the acceptable line.
Yes.
In terms of whatever assistance you could give. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Yes. Continue.
Thank you. Mr. Simons, you then, in paragraph 24.1 of your affidavit on page 7, referred to a meeting...
So I'm sorry, Ms. Wenzel. So the picture that I'm getting, and you must just tell me if that's how you understood it as well or how you see it, is they started with asking for a letter from the presidency that expressed support for what they were doing or trying to get. Then now they were wanting people from the presidency to be with them in their meeting with ICASA so as to assist them in their discussions with ICASA.
The letter, in fact, they wanted to use for all their proposals.
Yes.
So that is why they're making reference to meetings with GCIS,
Yes.
ICASA, GEMS, etc.
Yes.
So it is correct to conclude that what they wanted was, and I mean, it's almost like a fishing exercise where you put on your bait and everything, and then once the fish bites, you start reeling it in. And the letter in their possession would have been something like that. That look, we have the support of the presidency or the minister in the presidency.
Well, it may well be that there is some comparison to be done between what they were doing and what the Guptas seem to have been doing on the evidence that I've had so far, at least in some cases, where the evidence suggests that Mr. Duduzane Zuma would be present when the Guptas were talking to certain people, but he would not be making any serious contribution to the discussion, but he would be there.
Yeah.
I had evidence in that regard from Mr. Jonas, who said when the member of the Gupta family who he said offered him money if he agreed to work with them as Minister of Finance, he said Mr. Zuma and Mr. Hlongwane were there, but he said they were very quiet. Yeah. I had evidence from Mr. Dugwana, former MEC in the Free State government, who said there was a day when he and former Premier of the Free State, Mr. Mahashule, went to the Gupta residence when I think Mr. Rajesh Gupta spoke to them, and on that occasion Mr. Rajesh Gupta wanted Mr. Dugwana to sign a certain letter appointing one of their companies, giving them some government business in the Free State, and saying that he should get rid of his head of department, and proposing Mr. Richard Silege as the person to make head of department. And Mr. Dugwana said Mr. Duduzane Zuma was there, but he didn't say anything. And then I think there is another instance too, when one of the witnesses told me something similar, to say the Guptas were talking to him about something, and Mr. Duduzane Zuma was there, but he didn't say anything. So with you or the ministry in the presidency, first this group of young people asked for a letter of support from the presidency. Now they wanted you to be present at a meeting they were going to have with ICASA, where they were going to ask ICASA to agree to certain things.
In the correspondence read out earlier as well, they in fact asked me to meet with the acting CEO of GCIS
Yes.
before
Yes.
they come on board
Yes.
with a meeting. So,
Yes.
when I contact the acting CEO of GCIS,
Yes.
I do so in my capacity as a senior official in the ministry, at the office for the minister in the presidency. So they would have assumed that that would be a very powerful influencer to open those doors. And that is why you can see them asking very directly, can you facilitate the meeting with ICASA? Can you meet with Donald at GCIS? Can you then arrange a subsequent meeting for us with Donald, where you will also be present, etc.?
Actually, I've now remembered the third witness who told me something similar, Mr. Saluji, who was Group CEO of Denel, said he was taken to a meeting at the Gupta residence by Mr. Essa called him to a meeting. I think he attended 3 meetings there, but on the second meeting, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Zuma was part of the meeting when a member of the Gupta family was talking to Mr. Saluji, wanting some discussion on possible working together between Denel or business with Denel. And he said Mr. Tutuzane Zuma was there, but he didn't say anything. He was just there. So there have been a number of those instances. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Simons, you refer to further meetings in paragraph 24.1 and 25 of your affidavit. You refer to a meeting on the 29th of May 2014 in paragraph 24.1. How do you recall that date?
I think this was still part of my original affidavit to Parliament as well. At that stage, I would have had access to all my electronic as well as physical diaries. So we do archive our diaries. So I particularly remember this date. I also, I think, went to go and check it with my, what do you call it, your logbook, your kilometer logbook. So I went to this particular meeting. But as I indicated in my affidavit as well, the one I submitted to the Commission, I no longer have access to those electronic diaries, and if it's still archived, it would probably be in an archive somewhere. But from my side, once you leave a department, you do not have access to that department's email server.
And can you recall what happened at that meeting?
At this particular meeting, they wanted me to secure a contract with GCIs. You see, they use us to try and assist with securing the...
1 second, Mr. Simons. Maybe you can put on the aircon just a little bit. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yes, I interrupted you while you were answering. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you must say she must remind you what the question was.
Do you recall what happened at that meeting? What was it about?
At that meeting, they clearly indicated that they wanted these public information terminals, which is something that also comes from the conflict between the NYDA and Wintelligent, where they have these public information mobile terminals where anyone can access any information about government. But once you open up the page, there would be adverts either from Home Affairs, which they would have to pay for, as well as any other government department. And they've already determined the pricing as well, because they were saying that it was going to be 2,000 Rand per terminal. So let's say, for example, you then have 10 departments advertising on that particular terminal. Then you multiply it by the 200 plus that they already had available, and you come to a substantial monthly amount that they would be receiving through government advertising in public information, through public information terminals placed at the Tusong service centers of government. And at that stage, I think there were about over 200, if I'm not mistaken, Tusong service centers, active Tusong service centers throughout the country.
Yes.
They also wanted us, obviously, to secure space for the advertisements of those departments, and they wanted us to do that through GCIS, which is very similar to the now defunct TNA would have received advertising through GCIS for government adverts in the newspaper, for example.
And so am I understanding correct that they were wishing to earn funds in both renting the terminals and for the adverts that would be placed on those terminals by government departments.
Yes.
And then the meetings you referred to in paragraph 25 on the 30th of September 2014 and the 6th of October 2014, do you also get these dates from your electronic diary?
Yes.
And can you recall what these meetings were about?
Well, at that stage, it's September and October, we would have been in the Public Service and Administration Ministry. So we would have moved after the elections from the Office of the Presidency to DPSA. So they came back and said, look, you're no longer in the Presidency. We will deal with people who are in the Presidency still on some of these projects that they wanted. But now that we are at DPSA, they wanted us to assist them with access to potential contracts within the Public Service and Administration setup of government. And this is where they said, look, we can offer discounted cell phone contracts to all public servants. And the minister in DPSA would be able to issue a directive to the entire public service after meeting with the Treasury as well, to basically say, look, here is this group of young individuals. Let them provide cell phone contracts to the entire public service, and that obviously would have meant that they would have had a very wealthy contract assigned to them through the minister in Public Service and Administration at that stage.
And through which vehicle did they wish to pursue this venture?
That one was also when they were meeting with us at this particular stage. They were still meeting with us as Wintelligent to try and ensure that this contract progresses.
And with regard to that, if I can just refer to what you've said in paragraph 26. If you can just tell me if that's correct or not.
So at this stage, I also reported to the minister that it seems as if there was conflict in the group, and the colleagues not the colleagues, but the young people who were referring to themselves as Zuma family members, then made it very clear that there were some contracts that they were going to run through some empowerment group, which they were directly responsible for. Now, somehow, I will have to try and find out exactly which company they were referring to, but they were referring to a company that they would directly control. And that is when I then realized that even in this group, there were people who were looking at the group in its entirety, and then the meetings with some of these individuals were beginning to say that it was a more Zuma-linked family empowerment group that they wanted to benefit from this contract.
And did you receive a proposal from them with regard to the business they wish to do with GEMS, the government medical aid?
In fact, as indicated, I think if I recall correctly, GEMS had advertised for companies to tender for a massive marketing, branding, communications, PR contract of theirs. And these colleagues then felt that we should, in fact, push their company very strongly for this. And this was then the first time where I was actually told, look, here is our company profile. Can you take this to GEMS and give it to them? They then assumed that by doing that...
when you say they, what do you mean?
The young adults who wanted this business assumed that if I take it to them, that this contract was just automatically going to be awarded to them. But we all know that that was not how it was supposed to operate within government. I made that very clear to them at that stage that you're not just going to get this. But then they insisted that we at least ensure that they get, that we deliver the profile of the company to them. Now, that was the first stage. At that stage, where I then realized that there was another company involved as well, and that was particularly focused on communications, branding, marketing, advertising, etc. So I was handed this envelope. I took this envelope to Minister Chabane, because at that stage there was another controversy around it. They were saying that it had the endorsement of Lutuli House. And I went to Minister Chabane and I said, Minister, I'm told that this is endorsed by Lutuli House. That Minister just said, look, I don't think that is the truth. What you can do, and the only thing you must do, is give this envelope to the relevant person in GEMS, but also make it very clear that we don't expect anything to happen. You are just following a process where you can now also report that you have given this document to this individual. I fail to recall the name. I know it was a woman, and I know that she was either the head of communications at GEMS, or she was the spokesperson for GEMS. But I set up a meeting, and that meeting I set it up through the office, my office in the ministry at DPSA, and that meeting, I don't know if I recall the date exactly, but I actually met with her at a restaurant in Groenkloof in Pretoria.
And what happened?
At that meeting, I took the envelope. I gave it to her. I told her that, look, there's a multi-million rand contract that you have advertised, that these people are family members of the president. I then very clearly indicated that it was at that stage Busa Zuma and Mkondisi Zuma, that they, in this envelope, there is a profile of a company that they believe should get this contract. She was very, I could see that she was either upset or very nervous about what I was telling her. And to put her mind at ease, I actually told her that, look, they don't have to get this contract. That's not why I am here. I'm just delivering this envelope. She inquired about the minister, and I told her that the minister is very aware that the meeting is taking place, because at that stage it is also logged on my logbook. I drove from the office to this particular meeting, and the minister is aware that she doesn't need to panic, that it is beyond our control, but handing over the envelope does not mean that the contract is being awarded to this particular company. If memory recalls correctly, I don't think they were even considered for that particular contract.
And Mr. Simons, as far as you're aware, did these individuals succeed in obtaining any government contracts through your introductions?
From our side, not a single contract was awarded to them. As indicated, the image, and I know, Judge, many people say you cannot speak on behalf of a dead person. But some people tend to speak negatively of someone who had passed on, and the minister that we knew was a very, very different character. In fact, he despised corruption to an extent that he hated it to a level where he would not want to be seen or associated with people who directly practiced a level of corruption. He was one of those ministers where if you sat at a particular event, you would never find him sitting alone. He would mingle with individuals, ordinary public servants and so on, even inviting them to come and sit with him. So So he made it very clear that, look, this is our government. He used to speak very often about the sacrifices they made, particularly those of us who grew up in the 70s and the 80s as well, and obviously before that. And the question you would ask was, is this the ANC that people died for? Is this the ANC that people paid the ultimate sacrifice for example? And is this the country that we want this country to move in this particular direction? And his own answers would be that we should stop and prevent this country from going in the wrong direction. And that is why I can say, because it was an instruction from him, that look, meet with him, but make sure that nothing materializes, and keep them away from my office.
And were these individuals happy with the fact that all these introductions and meetings with you led to naught?
No, they were not happy, and that is why they started issuing threats at some of their meetings, that we will report you to the president, we will report you to Kulabuse, and they would even bring certain messages sometimes from I assume it comes from him, because they refer to him as a father figure, saying that Kulabuse is not happy with the delays, that he wants to meet with the minister, and that he will deal with you. So those are things that they would say at some of these meetings, when it became very clear that instead of making the road easier for them, we were actually beginning to make it a little bit more difficult.
Could you please tell the Chair what happened at the Oliver Tambo International Airport, which you refer to in paragraph 33?
Yes, and before that day, you would see part of these statements they would make was that Kulabuse is becoming impatient. Don't let him come to a meeting and deal with you. And I put that in quotation marks there, because that is how it was carried over to me. So on one of these occasions, we were asked, in fact, I was phoned and I was asked, look, we need to meet with you, because Kulabuse is now impatient, and so we must meet with you. And I then indicated that, look, they wanted a meeting with the minister as well. I lied. I said the minister is already on his way out of the country. We were on our way out of the country, but I said he's already out and that I'm joining him. They then asked me, where are you? I said, I'm on my way to OR Tambo International. And they said, look, can we meet with you at OR Tambo then? And I said, okay, no problem. So we had a meeting at OR Tambo. They then made it very clear there that Kulabuse would want to meet with the minister because of what they termed our delaying tactics, and that I mustn't be surprised if Kulabuse then just pitches up and sandbox me at because he was angry, he was upset that there's no progress with any of the contracts, and I'm talking from the presidency period now. So I mean, we had that discussion. I said I would bring it over to the minister's attention, and we left. I mean, we went out of the country, and they went back to Sandton.
And did they
I'm sorry, Ms. Wenzel.
Sorry?
You were dealing with what's at page 12 of the affidavit, but earlier on, and I don't know if you said this and I didn't hear you, you dealt with the Minister Chabane's failure or refusal to renew Mr. Manyi's contract as the CEO of GCIS or
Yes.
DG of GCIS. Can you just talk more about that?
You
said
the removal of Mr.
you said
Maseko.
paragraph 48 of your affidavit.
Yeah.
DG's Directors General are employed on a 5-year contract, And then you say when Mr. Manye replaced Mr. Masego, he was still within his 5-year contract. Do you want to talk more about that? What happened when Mr. Manye's contract as DG of GCIS came to an end after he had replaced Mr. Masego?
At that particular time, I was still at GCIS.
Yes. No, but I want you to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, many of us were very relieved when we got that news, but from the perspective of the minister, as I indicated the last time, I think we were in Australia when he spoke about it. I think the then...
That is Minister Chabane.
Chabane, yes.
Yeah, you were with him in Australia.
Yeah. And I think that what happened was that the public protector was releasing the Nkandla report. Now, while we were sitting in Australia, the minister then said, look, we should deal with the Nkandla issue very decisively. And we drafted a statement.
Yes, no, I don't want you to take it from
okay.
that as far as that, because I remember you gave evidence about that.
Yeah.
What I don't remember you dealing with either when you came here first time or this today is what happened when Mr. Manye's contract as DG of GCIS came to an end, because you do deal with it in your affidavit. You remember that?
Yes, in fact, you're talking about paragraph 48 and 49.
I'm talking about Mr. Manye. You remember Mr. Themba Masego was DG of GCIS.
Yeah.
He was removed and he went to DPSA.
Yes.
And he was replaced at GCIS by Mr. Mzwanele Manye.
Yeah.
And you say in your affidavit when Mr. Mzwanele Manye came to GCIS, he was within his contract of 5 years as DG, and he had been DG of the Department of Labor.
Yes.
And do you recall what happened when Mr. Manye's contract came to an end?
Do you want me to explain that to you from my perspective as a GCIS?
Let me ask you the question. Did Mr. Chabane renew Mr. Manye's contract as DG of GCIS?
No, he did not.
Do you know how that came about, that he made that decision?
In fact, from my experience as one of the senior managers in GCIS, there was a very good relationship between the late minister and Mr. Themba Maseko. From what I know and what I understand, and even when I got to the ministry in the presidency afterwards, that relationship was not at the same level between the late minister and Mr. Manye. So when Mr. Manye's contract, for example, came to an end, the minister was very clear then that he was not going to renew it.
Yes.
That in fact leads me to another issue which is not in the affidavit, but...
Yes, before you deal with it, there's one that I see in the affidavit. Do you know whether the president at the time had any particular position about whether Mr. Manye's contract should be renewed or not?
In fact, there were some people who believed that the contract was going to be renewed, that the new 5-year contract was going to be awarded.
Yes.
Instead, what we did was, in the presidency, when we realized that Mr. Manye was still representing GCIS on the MDDA board, which he was not supposed to have been doing at that stage, we wrote a letter to the president requesting that Mr. Manye also be removed from the MDDA board because he was occupying a position that technically belonged to GCIS, and he was no longer representing GCIS. So from that letter also it is clear that Minister Chabane was not too keen on having Mr. Manye in government, and in particular back at GCIS.
Look at paragraph 49 of your affidavit. Is what you say that true? Do you want to read it?
In fact, Minister Jobani informed me personally that Mr. Zuma was very angry with him over his refusal to renew the contract of Mr. Mani.
Is that true?
That is what the late Minister
Is that
Jobani
what you were
informed
told
me.
by
Yeah.
Minister Chabane?
This was what I reported when I gave evidence a few
Yes.
months ago.
Yeah.
And this is
Oh, you
part of what
covered
happened.
that.
Yeah. And this is part of what happened in Australia when
Yes.
I explained.
Oh, okay. No, thank you. There was something that you said was not here. Is that
No, in
you
fact,
have dealt with it now?
In fact, I see it easier.
Yes, okay, all
in
right.
Paragraph 50.
Yes,
Where
okay.
I said that shortly before the April 2014 elections, I drafted a letter for Minister Chabane for the attention of the President, requesting and informing him that Mr. Mani was no longer the CEO of GCS and therefore had to vacate the position he was occupying on the MDDA board.
Okay, thank you. You may proceed, Ms. Funzo.
Thank you. Just to finish off on the business dealings of the young gentleman, after the event at Oliver Tambo Airport, was a further attempt made by any of them to contact Mr. Shabani, Minister Shabani?
In fact, I can't recall if it was that particular trip, because Minister Chabane was very active with the envoy appointed by the President to negotiate the peace settlement in South Sudan at that stage. So we would very often find ourselves flying to South Sudan, Ethiopia, or Kenya, where because Kenya was also part of the AU facilitating country to ensure that there was stability in South Sudan. So at one of our Minister Chabane would, on all the trips that I traveled with him, he stayed at the Intercontinental in Nairobi, and that was one of the last incidents where I recall a Zuma family member directly, where I was witness to it, trying to meet with Minister Chabane, but that meeting never happened at the hotel. Whether the family member was there to meet with Minister Chabane, that solely I cannot verify that as well, because I do recall reading that they were also involved with potential business deals in Sudan, oil deals in that part of the continent. So Nairobi would probably just have been a very central place for people to meet.
And who is the family member you're referring to?
As indicated, it is Mr. Kulobuse Zuma.
And what did Minister Shabani say when you said he wanted to meet him?
He said I must ensure that no meeting takes place, that he did not want to meet with him.
Now, Mr. Simons, from paragraph 51 of your affidavit, you also deal with the appointment of Mr. Steve Swete's son as the DDG in the Communications Department of the Department of Home Affairs under Minister Garber.
Yeah.
Could you explain how Minister Shabani was involved with this?
As the relevant minister, and I think, Judge, I need to explain the relevance of it. Broadly, the relevance of it is that this was one of the occasions where the minister indicated to me, he in fact came to my hotel I was staying at in Cape Town. So after the cabinet meeting had ended, I was in bed already, and he came, he phoned on my cell. I got to the cell phone too late, and then the room phone rang. I answered it. It was Minister Chabane who said, "Look, I'm downstairs. Come down, and I want to have a chat." So I went down. It was roughly about 11 o'clock, 11:30 the evening, The minister then indicated to me his concern, saying that for the first time he was told after some time within the ANC, and after some time as a senior politician, that this is a political decision, and therefore the only thing I had to do was endorse that. And I asked what he was referring to, and he was referring to the appointment of Mr. Chwete as the DDG in the office of the then Minister of, I think it was it Home Affairs, Mr. Garber. Now, DPSA raised certain concerns at that stage with the appointment itself. Part of that would be, for example, you needed a particular amount of years of experience to be appointed at a DDG level. You needed certain qualifications in order for you to be at that level. And some of the reports, and I think it is also attached in the affidavit, where DPSA also raised concerns with the overall competency of the nominated candidate for this particular post. But the correspondence to and fro between Home Affairs at that stage and DPSA was that they wanted the appointment expedited.
Irrespective of whether the candidate qualified or not?
Yes.
That was their stance.
In fact, part of the process within government, and I think maybe even in the private sector, if you want a particular candidate appointed and your prescripts would say the advert must indicate that you require a postgraduate qualification, you can change the advert to some extent, and you can say, you're looking for a 3-year qualification, relevant qualification, or you can be very direct. So DPSA had raised certain concerns regarding the process, regarding the appointment, and obviously the minister felt that he was within his legislative duty then to sit, ask certain questions, and then to apply his mind, because the memorandums for appointment from Deputy Director General level upwards goes through the Public Service and Administrative Minister. So Minister Jubane had not signed the memorandum. The appointment was made. It was discussed, I think, at cabinet level. Cabinet had announced that the appointment is endorsed, and the following day the minister signed the relevant documentation. I doubt that he still signed the actual memorandum, cabinet memo, because it was already discussed at that level and technically endorsed. So when he came to my hotel, he was again, ministers are human at the end of the day. They are prone to all emotional characteristics that we as any human would be exposed to, and I think he felt a bit upset and also a little bit of anger at that stage, because he was saying, that I thought I used to be in the inner circle where political decisions are made, and then I'm told that it is a political decision, and I wasn't even party to that discussion. But it is the responsibility of the relevant minister, and that is why he then signed the documents. It was not backdated. It in fact reflects the actual dates when he signed it. So that was part of the discussions that the minister would, for example, raise with you when he wanted to talk to someone.
Now, do you have a clear recollection whether, for example, in the case of Mr. Chwete, Mr. Maihlome Chwete, whether what requirements he did not meet for that position of Deputy DG, or do you no longer have a clear recollection of that?
I think the documentation is in the affidavit as well, but it talks about at that stage it specifically referred to the overall competency. The competency in terms of whether you have the ability to manage staff, whether you have the ability to sit at a particular executive level and entertain discussions, etc. The other issues were, for example, the CV would say that I qualified for to get a particular degree from UNISA in 2013, and then in 2013 you are appointed at chief director level. So part of the concerns would be that you need to have a level of experience either at deputy director level, at director level, in order for you to qualify to be a chief director, for example, in government. And in order for you to be appointed at DDG level, you also need to have, next to your overall competencies outside of the public service, but you need to have a particular amount of experience that you have gained in terms of overall management of staff, finances. So I think part of the concerns raised by DPSA at that stage was around financial management aspects, overall competency in terms of people management, supervisory responsibilities. And also, I think there's a direct reference to the person does not have the relevant academic qualification.
Well, I'm interested to get relevant documents that may show exactly what was required for the position and what it is that he did not have to meet the requirements. We have had a situation, we have had evidence where, according to Mr. Ramatloti and Mr. Muffe, Minister Zwane or his department, Mineral Resources, wanted Minister Ramatloti, when he was Minister of Public Service Administration, to approve the appointment of Mr. Zwane Lemanyi as DG of the Department of Mineral Resources. Mr. Ramatloti said he refused to approve that appointment because Mr. Manyi did not have, I think, a degree or a postgraduate degree, and one of the academic qualifications that were required he did not have, according to Mr. Ramatloti, and he refused to approve his appointment. Mr. Muffe, who was Mr. Ramatloti's advisor at the time, gave evidence that subsequently Mr. Manyi went to Mr. Muffe and told him that the former president was very unhappy about the fact that I assume that is Mr. Ramatloti, had refused to approve his appointment. But nobody has said Mr. Ramatloti was mistaken or was wrong to think that Mr. Manyi did not have the required academic qualifications. So the picture one gets is as if there was a requirement in terms of the law or in terms of the advert to say the people who may be appointed, the person who may be appointed as DG must have this academic qualification. Mr. Manyi did not have it, so Mr. Ramatloti refused. But according to Mr. Muffe, Mr. Manyi went to see him and say the former president was very unhappy or was unhappy that they had refused. So you are telling me now about an instance where, as you recall, somebody did not meet certain requirements and your minister at the time, Minister of DPSA at the time, Mr. Chabane, refused to approve the appointment of this person as DDG, but Cabinet overruled him. So I would like to get more information about that. So if you can assist with whatever information, documentation that there may be other than what is here, please do, but it's been many years, so it might not be easy to find. Okay.
Chair, it is 4:00, but I don't expect that I'll be much longer with the witness. I don't know.
Okay, let's try and finish.
Can we try?
I'm sure Mr. Simons would prefer that too.
Yes.
Let's try and finish.
Yes.
I would imagine it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to finish.
I don't think so.
Yeah, let's try and finish.
Chair, subsequent to Mr. Simons giving evidence, the Commission's investigators had asked, pursuant to requests for information from DPSI, certain documentation has been obtained which has also been included in the bundle. I don't know if it's in sufficient documentation and whether, Chair, you would like us to obtain more, but if I can just quickly go through that documentation.
If it tells me what requirements Mr. Maihlome Chwete did not meet and what the requirements were for the position, that will be enough.
Yes.
Okay.
Could I refer you to page 59? Is it correct that this is an executive protocol regarding the appointments of DGs and deputy DGs?
Yes.
And was Minister Shabani involved in designing these sorts of protocols?
In fact, when the minister joined the Ministry, Public Service and Administration, we brought into his speeches the fact that we were referring to the reinventing the way we work as public servants and reinventing the way public servants should be working. And part of his position was that we actually need to ensure, and that is why at that stage there was already draft documentation about if you are applying for a post in the public service at deputy director level, you should at least have 4 to 5 years experience as an assistant director. If you are applying for a director in the public service, you should at least have 4 to 5 years experience at the level of deputy director and so on. And then obviously questioning, salaries that public servants were being paid at that particular time, whether the structure of those payments were correct. And he would often, say, we pay people to deal with media and communications in government more than what we pay a policeman and woman who daily puts their lives at risk to protect us. And he questioned that. He said that there was something fundamentally wrong with that. And that is why he was beginning to look at how do we restructure the entire public service so that South Africans actually get maximum benefit from the services being rendered and that we don't have this queue operation. So you would find that in there. There would also be your Senior Management Services Handbook, which would also outline the process for the appointment of DDGs, DGs, etc. And this would largely have been influenced by that document.
Thank you. I want to refer you to subparagraph 7.5. Subparagraph 7A on page 78, because it is relevant to this aspect. And there it deals with the selection committee and requires, it states, sub 7, a selection committee constituted for the appointment of, and then sub A head of a national department shall be chaired by the minister responsible for the portfolio in which the vacancy exists and include at least 2 other ministers and a national head of department. Do you know whether Minister Garber was part of the selection committee?
Ms. Wenzel, I'm sorry. I'm not so interested in that. I'm interested in what the requirements were that were laid down. Which ones did Mr. Chwete not have?
Yes. Not
about what other procedures were followed or not followed.
Yes, Chair. You will see in paragraph 7.8 on page 81, it refers to the submission of a cabinet memorandum, which is a requirement. And then I want to refer you to page 111, and you will see that this is a draft memorandum which has got place for Minister Shabani to sign on page 118, and it's a cabinet memoranda 8 of 2015 of the 4th of March 2015. Did Minister Shabani sign this?
No, that was not signed.
And if I can show you the document on page 120, it says, comments for the Minister's attention, appointments, 5-year contract appointment, Department of Home Affairs, post applied for, Department Director General Communications Services, and the name of the candidate, Mr. M. Tsweti. Now this document, who prepared this document?
Ms. Wenzel, that's taking too long. Does the document tell me what the requirements for the position were? Which requirement Mr. Tsweti didn't meet? That's all I need, nothing
Yes.
else. Let's go there.
If you have regard to page 121, paragraph 6, and in particular paragraph 6.1, firstly, whose comments were these?
These were obviously sourced from the legal and relevant sections within DPSA.
And it says relevance of job specifications, qualification versus the post as advertised. The post was advertised with a 3-year degree in public relations management and/or a grade 12 certificate, educational requirement. A postgraduate degree in the relevant field would be an advantage. According to the job description, a B degree in public relations management and communication services or an NQF level 6 equivalent is required, whilst a postgraduate degree in the relevant field would be an added advantage. It should be noted that the advert was specific to a 3-year degree in public relations management and/or a grade 12 certificate educational requirement, and the recommended candidate is in possession of a Bachelor of Administration degree. Based on this, the recommended candidate does not seem to meet the educational requirements of the post as advertised. A copy of the job evaluation report, which informed the advert, is not availed. Can you give any comments on that?
That obviously would have been handed to the Minister as well from the department side, and which would have influenced his decision to rather do a thorough investigation. So what you find here is the request from DPSA for the provision of more detailed information. So they do respond via an email, but that is all after the actual fact.
Well, you may or may not be able to enlighten me on this paragraph because it's been quite some time since these events. But this requirement here for a 3-year degree in public relations management and or a grade 12 certificate, educational requirements and the recommended candidate. How do you say you want a candidate to have a degree and or a grade 12 certificate? What does that mean? So what did this requirement mean?
In fact, that is why I said earlier, Chairperson, that within the public sector as well as in the private sector, it's very easy to try and get a person appointed that you have already identified prior to. So what you would do is you would craft your advert around the kind of qualifications that you think the candidate would have. Now part of the concerns, if you read through the documentation in its entirety, is the competency. In example, you've been in government for 2 years, you started at Chief Director level, and now all of a sudden we are appointing you at DDG level. So those were some of the concerns that was raised with the Minister then.
Yeah, but what it does mean, if I understand this requirement correctly, is that if you had a 3-year degree in public relations management, or you just had a grade 12 certificate, you would be fine.
You would be, yes. And
so the question is, Well, one, why do you want that particular degree if grade 12 is good enough?
That's it.
Because they are not saying that degree would be an advantage or is recommended. It seems to be put as a requirement.
Yes.
But if you just have grade 12 certificate is good enough.
You would.
So it may therefore well be that Cabinet's decision that Mr. Chwete be appointed, even if he didn't have that degree in public, 3-year degree in public relations management, was based on the fact that the advert said a matric is good enough. Okay, let's wrap up.
Chair, if I can just point one further thing out to you, if you don't mind, because I think it might be helpful. Could you turn to the document on page 124? It's an email dated the 3rd of March 2015, which purports to deal with the comments and queries raised. And with regard to the qualifications, Chair, if you can have regard to paragraph 6.1.
I'm sorry, what page do you want me to look at?
It's page 124, sorry, Chair.
124?
Yes, and in the middle of the email at the second half of the page, you will see it says para 6.1, which is where this issue of his qualifications had been raised. And Chair, the answer is not he had a certificate. This is what the answer that is, had a matric certificate. The answer that is given is the post was advertised with a 3-year post-matric qualification of grade 12, matric with relevant qualifications. Mr. Chwete is in possession of a 3-year post-matric qualification as well as matric with relevant qualifications. So
it's not worth, at least on what I've been told, it's not worth spending more time on it. Okay. Is there anything else you want to cover?
Yes. Finally, Chair, if I can just deal with the last part of his evidence, I don't think it will be more than 5 minutes. Could you just tell the Chair what happened after you posted something on Facebook in and around June 2015, dealt with at paragraph 56 of your affidavit?
Chairperson, as indicated to you earlier, I believed in our organization allowed people to express their views and opinions. It was guaranteed, protected in our constitution, etc. So I've been very vocal against what I thought was that the ANC, the country, is being taken in the wrong direction under the leadership then of the then President Zuma. So I usually express my views very openly. And in a discussion with some of the senior public servants and also comrades based in the Eastern Cape, in Gauteng, etc., I actually asked the question why it was that our then president was at the center of most of the corruption scandals that were happening in our country and being reported in the media. And then someone who participated in that discussion took it to the then acting Minister for Public Service and Administration, Nathi Mthethwa. He called me, was very, very, very upset and angry that I had said this in a group with fellow ANC members and so on. Questioned me, and that is where I was then, the next day, I was basically told, look, I don't want you in the ministry. So I was moved sideways. I sat on a half-empty floor in a particular corner there in DPSA for almost 9 months. Close to 10 months when I was eventually when Minister Ramatlodi joined DPSA. He then said, no, you can't have someone sitting and doing nothing and earning a salary, which I have been raising with my DG consistently on a monthly basis. Then look, I'm being paid, I'm not being used. You either charge me or you don't charge me, etc. There was a charge sheet. It was never presented to me. It had about 15 charges on it. The African National Congress was raised in every charge that was being raised against me. But at the end, I was reassigned to head up the Chief Directorate for Knowledge Management within the public service. And we produced a knowledge management framework for the entire public service, and that has now formally been endorsed. But I mean, the issue was just that even though the senior management guidelines allows for any public servant to participate in the affairs of political parties, discussions of political parties, in your private capacity, in your private time, people always turn around and say, no, there's perhaps we would be wiser to say there's no, if you're a public servant, there's no private time and no private capacity. But that was protected within the Senior Management Service Handbook. And I think that to a large extent was my main defense. I actually had to appoint a lawyer as well, who also asked DPSA consistently, when is my client being charged? And eventually, after a year and a half, 2-year period, we said that you no longer have the legal authority to charge me because you should have done that almost 2 years ago. So that still happens within the public service. I mean, one of the charges was that my actions were treasonous, and I asked for a definition of treason because I don't think my actions were anywhere close to being treasonous. But that currently still is what you would find, because most of the people who would threaten you then with these treasonous actions, with disciplinary action. I mean, I eventually left the public service, but you still have some of our individuals there, and it's their right to serve.
So this discussion, excuse me, which put you into trouble, was this a discussion that you were having with a group of friends and or colleagues and or comrades within the ANC during your own time?
On a Sunday afternoon.
On a Sunday afternoon. And do you know whether maybe almost everybody who was participating in the discussion was also a member of the ANC?
Yes.
That was so. It was like, was it like discussing an issue of interest to members of the ANC?
We were dealing with the issue around corruption, and and we felt then that the ANC had passed at almost every national conference of the ANC. Resolutions are adopted that says it is the responsibility of each and every ANC member, no matter where you find yourself in society, to combat, expose,
fight
and fight corruption. And on that basis, we were having this discussion. But someone screen grabbed it and sent it to Minister Tetwa, who was obviously very, very angry that I had made that statement, and that I was regarded as a senior a member in his ministry, that he was the acting minister of, and so on.
But is the position that you were expressing your bona fide views about something of concern to you as a member of the ANC and to you as a citizen, to friends and comrades who you were used to conversing with on issues?
Most of the participants in the group were in fact senior managers within the public service. But most of them were also very active within the ANC. And it just happened that one of those people were closer to Minister Tetwa, and because you are discussing it in a Facebook chat, you expect it to be a public. It's not a private, closed discussion. So that is how the threat of disciplinary action then arose within the public sector. But I'm glad to say that no charges were formally put to me at any stage.
But did you say that you were stopped from doing your normal work as a result of this, and made to stay in some office for about 9 months or so, doing nothing but being paid? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Were you on suspension or were you not on suspension?
I have asked my DG then whether I was formally suspended. I was never ever suspended in the public service. And then I asked for charges to be formally put to me. Those charges were never formally put to me until someone in DPSA brought me a charge sheet, which is also part of the affidavit, that says that these are the charges that is being prepared against you, so you need to prepare yourself for it. The lawyer then requested that the charge sheet be formalized and that I be handed that formally. And for almost 2 years of asking, no charges were then brought forward.
Was it for about 2 years or about a year?
No, remember, I think it was from about 2015 until Minister Ramatlodi joined the ministry as former Minister of Public Service and Administration, when I was given another alternative post within DPSA.
Yes.
And then I stayed there for about a year before formally resigning from the public service.
But is your recollection that the time you spent sitting in an office and not doing anything but getting paid, is your recollection that that was about a year?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yes, and Chair, the charge sheet referred to is at page 46. I don't think we need to go there, and I have no further questions, Chair.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Simons, for coming to share what you know with the Commission. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. If we have need for you to come back, we'll ask you again, but thank you very much. You are excused.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
We are going to adjourn now. Tomorrow we are going to start at 10:30, not 10 o'clock.
Thank you, Chair.
And then tomorrow and the days after, I'll be hearing evidence relating to law enforcement
Yes.
agencies.
Yes.
We adjourn.
All right.